Collars are a design feature that enhances the appearance of a garment. Collars come in many shapes and sizes as well as styles. A straight or standing collar is the mandarin collar. Collars may be set in completely around the neckline or split in the back. The Peter Pan or round or rolled collar has a very young look. The convertible collar, slightly rounded or straight. The convertible collar is named because it does convert. It may be worn closed or worn open. Another standing collar is the band collar. A button finishes the band collar. A relative to the band collar is the shirt collar, where the band and then the shaped collar, very similar to a convertible collar, are combined. The shirt collar. Each collar has a slightly different shape. The convertible collar with a rather straight neckline. The shirt collar has a slightly curved neckline to the upper collar and a straighter neckline for the band, which is attached to the garment. The mandarin has once more a straighter collar. This helps the collar to stand. And then the Peter Pan, which has a round neckline. Each collar has the upper collar or outer collar, an interfacing, and an under collar or inner collar. The first thing we do is take the interfacing and bring it to the outer collar or upper collar. And to secure the interfacing, we will thread trace very quickly a seam that attaches the interfacing to the neckline of the collar. At the same time, we're marking this neckline, we're also attaching the interfacing. 1/2 inch seam allowance is all one needs. When you've got your interfacing basted in place, we will bring the upper collar and the under collar together. With the upper collar facing down, right side up, we'll bring right sides together of under collar and upper collar. Now, Now you can see why we say upper or under. There is a definite difference in the size of the collar. The under collar or inner collar must always be smaller. We start by pinning the two collars together at the neckline intersection. We now must bring the under collar to fit the upper collar. We bring it around in this manner, and where you see the collar seems to start to roll, well, we must slightly stretch the under collar, pulling the under collar to fit the upper collar. Bring all the edges together. Now, the procedure is the same for all collars. You stretch the under to meet and fit the upper. There's just one slight difference in only the shape of the interfacing. When you have a collar with very pointy corners, as in a shirt collar, before you go on to attach your collars, you clip off the corner of the interfacing. Now that we have all our collars pinned together, we have some collars that have been basted already. The basted Peter Pan, the basted Mandarin, the basted Convertible, and the basted shirt collar. The difference in the shirt as opposed to the other collars is that the band is not to be basted together at this point. The band collar is applied when the collar has been stitched and turned. We're now going to go to the sewing machine and stitch our collars. We're going to stitch the Peter Pan collar and the Mandarin collar. There are many similarities in that it's one continuous row of stitching to form the collar. We stitch with the upper collar or the interfacing side up. We are using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Care should be taken when stitching a curve that you do not form corners. When we're ready to finish the collar, we'll take out our basting stitch. Once more, when you stitch and you're stitching very close to a basting stitch, you may have some difficulty in removing this stitch. we have to start trimming the collars now. The mandarin collar, if it is made with a very light fabric, we may trim off the interfacing, the collar, upper and under collar, very closely. If your fabric is a heavier fabric, you may find you must trim this in layers. The layer trimming involves trimming the interfacing very, very close to the stitching line, the upper collar, a slight amount, basing it on 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. You may not have to trim that at all. And the under collar much closer to the stitching line. This will give you a layered effect, and when your collar is turned to the right side, we will not see a ridge. The Peter Pan collar has some other problems in that it is highly curved, and these curves can tend to give you a problem when you're turning it to the outside. Once more, we trim away all the interfacing. Approximately half of the under collar seam allowance. We now have to deal with these corners or curves that, when turned to the right side, may form corners. Because if you notice, when you turn something to the inside, your circumference of the edge is larger than the circumference of the inner circle, so to speak. So we must wedge out some of the fabric. And wedging out is taking little bits of triangles as we go along. You will notice that I am not taking my triangles out in both layers. I first remove these little wedges in the upper collar, and then I'll turn it to the wrong side, and where I have not removed a wedge in the upper collar, I will remove a wedge in the under collar. This may seem tedious, but at the end it pays off. We'll continue to do this along the whole edge, although you'll find that the straighter area of the collar will receive less wedging than the curved area. We have done all the clipping. And all the trimming necessary for a mandarin collar. We turn the collars to the right side. And this is where finger pressing is very important. It helps to press with your finger the seam allowance towards the under collar. Of course, if you're using a type of fabric that will not work with finger pressing, this must be carefully done with the iron. And we then roll the collar to the right outside, and we bring our neckline edges together. In bringing your neckline edges together, you will see a very small bit of the upper collar, and that's the way you should finish this collar. We would press it with an iron on the wrong side of the collar. The Peter Pan collar gets the same amount of work, but you may find it a little more difficult to turn and crease that edge because it's a sharper curve. And again, we turn it to the right side and make sure that you get that very, very little edge of the upper collar showing. Our finished collar, the under collar and the upper collar. Our Mandarin collars and Peter Pan collar are now ready to set into a neckline. The shirt collar and convertible collar have similar characteristics in that they have points, and each point is dealt with as you come to it. The differences vary from the sharpness of the point to the weight of the fabric. With a wider point, or a point that is not as long, when you come to the end of that seam, instead of cornering it, you come across at a right angle and then continue back and finish stitching that collar. The other corner will be able to do the same thing. And when you're finished stitching, your collar will look like that. The shirt collar has a much longer and sharper point. Therefore, you will find that 2 stitches across help keep the illusion of a long, sharp point. And when we finish, our shirt collar will look like this. Trimming is complicated only by our points. And as the edge of the convertible collar is rather straight, a very close trim is all we really need. We trim it close to the seam line. Layering the fabric or the seam allowance only is necessary if you have a heavyweight fabric. When you come into the corners, we clip straight across. We then trim in as if we were sharpening a point. The shirt collar has the same thing going for it. We take off the edge, or that corner, come in close, and then trim away. Occasionally, because the shirt collar has a slight curve, you may find that wedging has the desirous effect of eliminating any type of bulk. Our shirt collar trimmed and clipped, and our convertible collar trimmed. We're now going to trim away anything else that's necessary, and we're going to turn these collars to the right side. Once more, we've got a slightly different problem in that you have to deal with a point. And using your sharp fingernail or a blunt instrument, we turn the collar to the right side, at all times trying to maintain that point, and at the same time hoping that you have matching points, because this is a very difficult problem to make sure that both points are finished the same way. Turning it to the very, very end. And now we will roll it once more. We'll crease our edges so that it's creased, the seam allowance is creased towards the under collar, rolled over with the necklines meeting, and we have that very tiny edge of the upper collar showing. Our convertible collar and the shirt collar pressed. And you'll see the very, very edge of the convertible collar shows the upper collar seam. We'll now show you how important it is for both halves of the collar to match with our finished points. The shirt collar has now one more step to go. We must attach the band, the outer band and the inner band. We take the outer band with the right side of the band to the under collar and bring the edges together. Matching notches, pin it in place. We will now make a sandwich with the collar, the filling between the two neck bands, by placing the inner neck band to the outer collar, right sides together. We will pin the edges together. The process is called sandwiching. When pinned together, we will baste. Now we baste the collar from the edge of the band through both layers to the end of the collar. We will stitch the shirt collar using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. After removing the basting, we will trim away excess seam allowance. Once more, you should be aware that if you're using a heavier weight fabric, you must trim in layers. We'll now turn the collar to the right side. The under collar, the outer collar. And we crease and press. With the neck edges meeting, we can close the collar at the center front. Turn the neckband in, the inner neckband, the outer neckband, the under collar, the upper collar. And our shirt collar is finished.